Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into medieval battles, those glorious clashes of steel and honor that Hollywood loves to romanticize. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Being a knight wasn't heroic destiny. It was basically signing your own death warrant with a really expensive pen, then praying your horse didn't trip on the way to your own funeral. We're talking about elite warriors who needed construction crews to get dressed, battles that paused for lunch breaks, and warfare that was less noble quest and more seasonal employment with a 95% workplace fatality rate. Before you settle in completely, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we're doing here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore why everything you think you know about medieval warfare is beautifully, hilariously, and tragically wrong. Because trust me, by the end of tonight you'll realize you wouldn't have lasted a single day in a world where your most advanced medical treatment was prayer and your retirement plan was not getting stabbed by a peasant with a farm tool. Meet William de Montfort, 17 years old, currently experiencing what we'd now call a full-scale panic attack inside a metal coffin that cost his family 3 harvests to afford. His hands are shaking so violently he can barely grip his lance, which weighs about as much as a modern motorcycle and is just as likely to kill him as his enemies. This is your medieval knight, not a hero, but a terrified teenager whose father basically took out a second mortgage on their entire bloodline to buy him the privilege of dying in style. You think student debt is crushing? William's family went into generational poverty to fund his military career. It's like if your parents sold the house, the car, and your little sister's college fund to buy you a single piece of equipment for a job where the primary requirement is not dying horribly in front of your neighbors. And unlike modern military gear, there was no warranty, no insurance, and definitely no customer service hotline when your armor gave you heat stroke in the middle of getting stabbed. His horse, let's call him Anxiety because that's what this whole situation is, weighs 1,500 pounds, is wearing his own custom-fitted anxiety disorder, and absolutely did not sign up for this. Imagine strapping a refrigerator to a sports car, then driving it into oncoming traffic while wearing a welding mask. That's a cavalry charge. Except the sports car has opinions, the refrigerator is having an emotional breakdown, and the oncoming traffic is specifically trying to turn you into medieval street pizza. The famous thunderous cavalry charge that supposedly struck fear into enemy hearts? Picture instead a group of very expensive, very panicked teenagers riding toward each other at about the speed of a modern mall walker, most of them actively praying they'll fall off before actual violence has to happen. It's like watching a demolition derby where all the drivers are crying and the cars cost more than houses. At Agincourt, French knights, the medieval equivalent of Navy SEALs with trust funds, got so stuck in the mud that English peasants, people who normally couldn't afford shoes, just walked up and started ending careers with farming equipment. It's like watching an entire Formula One race get defeated by parking enforcement officers with clipboards, except the clipboards were sharp and the parking tickets were fatal. But here's what makes medieval warfare psychologically devastating. The waiting. William sits on his increasingly agitated horse for hours, marinating in his own terror sweat, thinking about his little sister who made him a good luck charm, his mother who cried for 3 days when he left, and his father who tried to look proud but kept practicing his sorry for your loss face in the mirror. Modern soldiers have radios, air support, and medevac helicopters. Medieval knights had thoughts, prayers, and the growing suspicion that everyone lied about how fun this would be. The actual charge lasted maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes of pure, concentrated terror to justify years of training, a family's financial suicide, and a young man's complete psychological breakdown. Most battles weren't decided by skill or strategy, but by who fell down first and couldn't figure out how to get back up while wearing the medieval equivalent of a washing machine. It's like if modern warfare was decided by a game of tag, except everyone was wearing deep-sea diving suits and the ground was made of ice. When the fighting inevitably paused, because even medieval warriors needed bathroom breaks and someone always forgot to bring lunch. William might find himself sitting across from another equally terrified teenager who's also wondering how his life choices led to this particular brand of expensive misery. They'd share water, compare armor craftsmanship, and discuss ransom rates like modern gig workers comparing health insurance plans. Except instead of healthcare, they were negotiating the price of not being murdered by someone they'd just met. The human cost was staggering not just for the knights, but for entire family ecosystems that invested everything in their sons' military careers. It's like if every family had to crowdfund their own private military contractor, except the contractor was their own child, and the return on investment was measured in whether he came home with all his original limbs. Modern military families worry about PTSD and deployment schedules. Medieval families worried about bankruptcy, social disgrace, and explaining to the neighbors why they sold great-grandmother's wedding ring to buy their son the right to get trampled by horses. Brother Thomas, a monk engineer at Saint-Denis Monastery, is currently having what can only be described as a medieval existential crisis. The Pope, the literal representative of God on earth, has just banned his life's work. Thomas spent 5 years perfecting a crossbow design that could punch through plate armor at 200 yards, and now the church says it's too effective for Christian warfare. It's like being a software engineer who invents the perfect social media algorithm right before Congress decides to ban the internet. The crossbow crisis of 1139 was basically medieval Europe's nuclear arms treaty, except instead of preventing global annihilation, they were trying to keep knights from becoming obsolete. Pope Innocent II looked at this weapon and said, "This is too deadly for civilized combat," which is roughly equivalent to the UN looking at modern warfare and saying, "You know what? This is getting out of hand." The emotional weight on engineers like Thomas was crushing. They'd solved a technical problem so effectively that they'd created a moral problem. Picture the desperation that drove medieval weapons development. Thomas isn't just an engineer, he's a man of God trying to reconcile his faith with his talent for creating things that make people very dead very quickly. It's like being a pacifist who's really, really good at designing tanks. The crossbow worked so well that any peasant with a week of practice could drop a knight who'd spent his entire life learning to fight. It was the medieval equivalent of giving everyone a gun, except guns hadn't been invented yet, so they gave everyone something even more terrifying: equality. The psychological warfare was devastating. Castle defenders weren't just fighting for their lord's honor, they were fighting for their families cowering in the chambers below, knowing that every minute the walls held was another minute their children got to keep breathing. When you're dropping heated sand through murder holes onto attackers, you're not thinking about military tactics. You're thinking about your daughter's laugh and how much you'd rather die than let strangers hurt her. The bee-bomb represents everything beautiful and terrifying about medieval innovation. Some unnamed genius looked at a beehive and thought, what if we militarized this? It's like a modern defense contractor looking at a hornet's nest and thinking it needs a delivery system. The psychological impact was devastating. Imagine being a knight, already claustrophobic in your helmet, suddenly dealing with thousands of angry bees that can get inside your armor, but you can't get out of yours. It's like being trapped in a very expensive bee prison while someone with a sadistic sense of humor watches you panic. Medieval siege engineers were basically the Lockheed Martin of their time, except their R&D budget was measured in desperation rather than dollars. At Carcassonne, engineers catapulted not just stones, but diseased animal carcasses, human heads, and occasionally live prisoners for psychological effect. It's biological warfare with the engineering sophistication of a NASA mission and the moral complexity of a war crimes tribunal. And everyone just accepted this as Tuesday afternoon siege work. The emotional toll on both sides was extraordinary. Defenders watching their walls being pounded by stones the size of cars, knowing each impact brought enemy soldiers closer to their families. Attackers operating siege engines, knowing they were essentially running medieval artillery with no safety protocols and a life expectancy measured in weeks. It's like being assigned to operate heavy machinery that might explode at any moment, except the machinery is pointed at other people, and failure means everyone you care about dies. Greek fire, medieval napalm, was so secret that its formula died with the Byzantine Empire. Engineers who knew how to make it were treated like modern nuclear scientists, valuable, protected, and constantly worried about their knowledge falling into the wrong hands. The stuff burned underwater, couldn't be extinguished, and turned naval battles into floating nightmares. Imagine being the guy who invented this, knowing you'd created something so terrible that entire civilizations would rise and fall trying to steal your recipe. Early cannons were essentially controlled explosions operated by people with no understanding of metallurgy or explosive safety. Cannon crews had one of the highest casualty rates in medieval warfare, not from enemy action, but from their own equipment literally blowing up in their faces. It's like being assigned to operate a nuclear reactor using only medieval knowledge of how fire works. The technology was advancing faster than safety protocols, creating innovations that were simultaneously miraculous and homicidal. Modern military families worry about IEDs and enemy fire. Medieval military families worried about their sons being killed by their own weapons because nobody had figured out how to make gunpowder not explode randomly. The engineering was impressive. The workplace safety was non-existent. Eleanor of Aquitaine receives a letter that will haunt her for the rest of her life. Her son Richard, the king, the crusader, the heir to everything she'd built, is alive but captured. His ransom is set at 150,000 marks, roughly 35 tons of silver, or in modern terms, about the GDP of a small country. She's facing the kind of choice that destroys parents: bankrupt the kingdom or abandon her child. It's like getting a ransom demand that exceeds your nation's defense budget, except the kidnappers are following internationally recognized business practices. This is the emotional reality of medieval warfare that no one discusses: the families left behind, calculating the financial cost of love. Eleanor will spend the next 2 years liquidating everything: castles, churches, royal treasures, even the silver spoons from the kitchen, to free her son. Every gold cup becomes a piece of Richard's life. Every piece of jewelry transforms into a day he might survive. Modern families deal with medical bankruptcy. Medieval families dealt with ransom bankruptcy that lasted generations. The professional scavengers working battlefields weren't monsters, they were entrepreneurs in an economy where death was the primary export industry. Thomas the Gleaner supports a wife and 3 children by following armies and collecting everything from armor to teeth. It's grim work, but it pays better than farming and has more job security than being a knight. He's like a modern recycling specialist, except his raw materials used to be someone's beloved son. And the sorting process involves checking corpses for valuables while trying not to think about the families who'll never know what happened. The tooth collectors haunt me personally. In an age before dental care, healthy teeth were valuable commodities for transplants and dentures. These men worked battlefields with delicate pliers and specialized hammers, extracting not just gold teeth but healthy ones that could be sold to wealthy patients who'd lost their own to medieval medicine. Imagine the emotional disconnection required to see a young knight's corpse and think primarily about dental inventory. It's like being a modern organ harvester, except less regulated and more socially acceptable. But here's what makes medieval warfare uniquely heartbreaking. Everyone knew the rules, and the rules made everything worse. Families invested life savings in sons' military equipment, knowing that capture meant financial ruin, but death meant total loss. It's like sending your child to college, except college might randomly demand a ransom that destroys 3 generations of your family's accumulated wealth, and there's no financial aid program. The retreat protocols were both civilized and devastating. When armies began losing, accepted practice was organized withdrawal, which sounds reasonable until you realize this meant abandoning wounded soldiers who couldn't move quickly. Medieval battle physicians, the lucky few who existed, had to make triage decisions that would break modern emergency room doctors. Save the nobleman who can pay for treatment, or help the common soldier bleeding out in the mud? It's like being a modern EMT, except your decisions are based on the patient's credit score, and you're making them while people are actively trying to kill you. The fake battles represent something even more psychologically complex. Professional fighters staging elaborate combat for entertainment, knowing they're performing violence that real families are experiencing as life-destroying tragedy. It's like professional wrestling, except some of the audience has sons dying in actual wars that look exactly like the performance. The emotional cognitive dissonance must have been staggering. Imagine being an actor who specializes in war movies while your neighbor's son is dying in an actual war zone. Medieval warfare created an entire generation of what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD sufferers, except there was no framework for understanding psychological trauma. Knights who survived major battles often became hermits, monks, or what medieval sources politely called touched by God, but what we'd recognize as combat veterans struggling with untreated trauma, survivor's guilt, and the kind of nightmares that made sleep impossible. The economic aftermath rippled through generations like a medieval recession that never ended. Families who lost sons lost inheritances, labor, future security, and social standing. It's like if every car accident also came with generational debt, social shame, and the complete destruction of your family's financial future. The English longbowmen at Agincourt weren't just defeating French military forces, they were destroying French family wealth that had been accumulated over centuries of careful planning and sacrifice. Modern military families have support systems, veteran benefits, and social recognition for their sacrifice. Medieval military families had prayer, debt that lasted generations, and the hope that their investment in organized violence would somehow pay off before it killed them. The emotional cost was carried not just by the warriors but by entire communities who sent their best young men to participate in what was essentially a very expensive, very deadly lottery where the house always won. Sir Geoffrey de Clare sits in his tent with a ledger that reads like a modern freelancer's nightmare income tracking spreadsheet. Spring contract with the Earl of Norfolk, £40 plus horse allowance minus medical expenses for that infected sword wound. Summer campaign in France, £60, but he had to buy his own food and the exchange rate was terrible. Autumn tournament circuit, £15, and a minor concussion that still gives him headaches when it rains. Winter, unemployed, and wondering if he should update his LinkedIn profile to include expert in not dying while stabbing people. This is the gig economy, medieval style, except instead of driving for Uber, Geoffrey drives sharp objects into people for money, and his customer reviews literally determine whether he lives or dies. He's fought for 4 different lords this year, not out of political conviction or noble loyalty, but because war is how he pays rent. It's like being a modern military contractor, except there's no HR department, no workplace safety regulations, and if you get a bad performance review, they feed you to the crows. The emotional reality of professional medieval warfare was exhaustion disguised as honor. Geoffrey maintains friendships with men he's technically supposed to kill, manages his reputation across multiple employers like a modern consultant, and worries constantly about workplace injuries that could end his career. Except in his case, career-ending injury means anything from a limp that slows him down to missing fingers that make sword gripping difficult. There's no disability insurance, no workers' compensation, just the growing realization that your body is your business model, and it's depreciating fast. The ransom system created the most psychologically complex business relationships in human history. Sir Edward has captured Count Philippe, and now they're sitting in Edward's tent like 2 businessmen negotiating a merger, discussing Philippe's net worth, his family's liquidity, and payment schedules, while Philippe's men are dying outside. It's like conducting a mortgage negotiation while your house is actively burning down around you, except more polite and with better wine. Modern hostage situations are traumatic precisely because they're abnormal. Medieval ransom situations were traumatic because they were routine business practices that everyone just accepted as normal Tuesday afternoon commerce. Families budgeted for potential ransom costs the way modern families budget for health insurance, except health insurance doesn't usually involve your son being held captive, by someone who might decide to execute him if the check bounces. The battlefield journalists were dealing with their own psychological crisis that would break modern war correspondence. Brother Marcus follows armies to document battles for his monastery's chronicles, but he's essentially a war correspondent with no press credentials, no safe zone, and a theological obligation to find divine meaning in meaningless violence. He watches young men die for causes that change with political winds, then writes beautiful Latin descriptions of horrible events for readers who romanticize warfare from the safety of their scriptoriums. Marcus struggles daily to reconcile his faith with what he's actually witnessing. He's supposed to see God's will in action, but what he's actually seeing is economic competition played out with swords, family feuds escalated to mass violence, and young men dying because someone's cousin insulted someone else's cousin at a wedding 3 years ago. It's like being a modern war correspondent who has to file stories explaining how every atrocity is part of a divine plan while watching teenagers bleed out in the mud over trade disputes. The entertainment battles were emotionally devastating in completely different ways. Professional fighters like Sir Roland perform elaborate combat for noble audiences, staging dramatic victories and defeats that mirror real warfare but lack the genuine terror and permanent consequences. Roland has to fake the emotions that real warriors experience authentically, the fear, the rage, the desperation, except he's performing them for entertainment while real soldiers are experiencing them for survival. The audience for these staged battles included families who'd lost children to actual warfare. They're watching entertainment that looks exactly like the experiences that destroyed their lives, applauding choreographed violence that mimics the real violence that killed their sons. It's like military families watching war movies for fun, except the war movies use real weapons and sometimes people actually get hurt accidentally, and everyone pretends this is normal. The seasonal nature of warfare created unique emotional rhythms that governed entire societies. Families said goodbye to sons every spring, like sending them off to summer camp, except summer camp had a 40% fatality rate, and the camp counselors were actively trying to murder each other. Villages planned around the absence of their fighting-age population, like modern towns plan around college schedules, except instead of winter break, they waited to see who would come home and who wouldn't. Medieval military families lived in constant cycles of preparation, anxiety, brief relief, and financial calculation that would drive modern families insane. Modern military families deal with deployment schedules and combat pay. Medieval families dealt with seasonal unemployment that might result in death, disability, generational debt, or just their son deciding he liked working for the other team better because they had superior catering. The most emotionally complex aspect was the friendship networks that crossed enemy lines, like a medieval LinkedIn where everyone was constantly trying to kill each other professionally but not personally. Knights maintained relationships with men they might face in battle, participated in tournaments where they practiced killing techniques on friends, and socialized at courts where yesterday's ally might be tomorrow's mortal enemy, and everyone just accepted this as normal networking. If medieval warfare reveals humanity's complex relationship with violence, economics, and the gig economy from hell, Roman engineering reveals something even more mind-bending: our ancestors' relationship with impossibility itself. While medieval Europe was turning warfare into a business model with a mortality rate that would make modern insurance companies weep, ancient Rome was treating the laws of physics like polite suggestions and building infrastructure that makes modern engineers question their life choices and consider early retirement. We're not just talking about impressive, ancient construction that's pretty good for its time. We're talking about Romans who solved engineering problems that we struggle with today, using mathematics we're still trying to understand, creating materials that outperform modern equivalents, and building things so impossible that we're still not entirely sure how they did it. They didn't just build an empire, they built an empire that laughed at the word impossible and then used it as a foundation material. Medieval knights worried about surviving individual battles and not embarrassing their families. Roman engineers worried about creating things that would outlast entire civilizations and make people 2,000 years in the future question everything they thought they knew about technological progress. The emotional weight of their achievements was entirely different. They weren't just solving problems, they were building monuments to human capability that would make future civilizations feel inadequate about their own accomplishments. So settle back in, because Roman engineering is about to make medieval innovation look like a warm-up act performed by enthusiastic amateurs with good intentions and questionable life insurance. Meet Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, a Roman engineer who's currently staring at a technical problem that should be impossible to solve with ancient technology. Yet he's about to solve it anyway because Romans apparently didn't get the memo about what was supposed to be achievable in the ancient world. He's been tasked with making water flow uphill for 30 miles without pumps, electricity, or any of the technology we consider essential for basic plumbing. It's like being asked to build a space program using only hammers and good intentions, except Marcus is going to succeed, and his solution will still be working 2,000 years later, when our modern infrastructure is falling apart. The emotional weight on Roman engineers was staggering. They weren't just building for their lifetimes, they were building for eternity, and they knew it. Every calculation had to account for centuries of use. Every material choice would be judged by civilizations that hadn't been born yet. It's like being a software engineer, except your code has to run perfectly for 20 centuries without updates, patches, or tech support. And if it fails, entire cities die of thirst. Marcus and his team are about to accomplish something that modern engineers still struggle to understand: making water flow upward using nothing but gravity and pressure differentials. The Pont du Gard in France is just one visible piece of a system that transported water across 30 miles of varied terrain, maintaining a gradient so precise that the total drop was only 56 feet over the entire distance. It's like threading a needle while blindfolded, except the needle is 30 miles long and millions of people will die if you miss. But here's what keeps Marcus awake at night. He's not just building a water system, he's building the foundation of civilization itself. Without his aqueducts, Rome can't exist. No water means no people. No people means no empire. No empire means the entire known world collapses into chaos. Modern engineers work on important projects. Roman engineers worked on existential necessities. The pressure was literally civilization ending. The technical sophistication required was mind-boggling. Romans understood fluid dynamics, pressure differentials, thermal expansion, and hydraulic power transmission at a level that wouldn't be matched again until the Industrial Revolution. They had standardized pipe sizes, pressure ratings, and safety systems that modern municipal engineers study and attempt to recreate. Marcus was essentially a hydraulic physicist working with Bronze Age tools and Stone Age materials. Roman buildings had running water on multiple floors, achieved through pressure systems that distributed water throughout entire structures like modern skyscrapers. The baths of Caracalla had hot and cold running water, heated pools at different temperatures, and fountains that operated continuously. All of this in a building complex that could accommodate 1,600 bathers at once. It's like building a modern luxury resort, except with Roman technology and the expectation that it would still be functioning when your great-great-grandchildren were dust. Their toilet systems put most modern plumbing to shame, and the psychological impact on Roman engineers who designed them was profound. They knew they were creating sanitation systems that would prevent disease, increase life expectancy, and improve quality of life for millions of people. Roman toilets weren't just functional, they were social gathering places with heated seats, running water for cleaning, and sophisticated sewage systems that carried waste away without smell or contamination. It's like designing both a bathroom and a social club, except your design decisions affect public health for centuries. Here's where it gets completely impossible. Romans had automatic flush systems powered by springs and reservoirs configured to release water at timed intervals, automatically cleaning the entire system without human intervention. They essentially invented the modern toilet, then somehow forgot to tell anyone else about it for the next 1,500 years. It's like inventing the internet, then losing the manual, and having to reinvent it from scratch using smoke signals and carrier pigeons. But the emotional cost was enormous. Marcus carries the weight of knowing that his failures would be measured in human lives. A miscalculation means disease outbreaks. A design flaw means cities without water. A material failure means the collapse of civilization. Modern engineers have safety margins and backup systems. Roman engineers had prayer, precision, and the absolute certainty that failure meant death on a scale that was difficult to comprehend. Roman bathhouses had heated floors and walls using hypocaust systems that circulated hot air through hollow spaces, providing even, consistent heating throughout massive buildings. They had temperature controls, humidity management, and ventilation systems that regulated air quality automatically. Marcus didn't just design heating systems, he designed climate control for buildings larger than modern shopping malls, using only fire, stone, and mathematical principles that wouldn't be understood again for over a millennium. The most mind-bending part: they had working elevators. Not primitive pulley systems, but sophisticated hydraulic elevators powered by water pressure that could lift heavy loads between floors smoothly and safely. The Colosseum had dozens of these elevators operating simultaneously, bringing gladiators, animals, and scenery up from underground chambers like a massive theatrical machine operated by hydraulic precision. Marcus wasn't just an engineer, he was a magician working with physics, creating impossibilities that modern technology struggles to match. And he did it all, knowing that his work would outlast empires, survive barbarian invasions, and continue functioning long after his civilization had become a historical curiosity studied by people who could barely comprehend how he'd accomplished any of it. Gaius Sergius Orata stands over a batch of concrete that will fundamentally break every assumption about materials science for the next 2,000 years. He's mixing volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius into his concrete, not because he understands the chemistry, the periodic table won't be invented for another 1,800 years, but because generations of Roman engineers have noticed that this particular mixture does something impossible. It gets stronger with age. It's like accidentally inventing a self-improving building material while trying to make regular concrete, except the accident is so perfect that modern scientists still can't fully replicate it. The psychological pressure on Gaius is crushing. He's not just building for his client or his emperor, he's building for eternity, and everyone knows it. Roman concrete structures were expected to last forever, literally forever, and the engineers who built them carried that weight with every decision. It's like being a software engineer, except your code has to run flawlessly for geological time periods. And if it fails, archaeologists 2,000 years from now will judge your entire civilization as incompetent. Modern scientists finally figured out why Roman concrete is so superior, and the answer is typically Roman in its brilliant simplicity mixed with impossible sophistication. The volcanic ash creates an ongoing chemical reaction that continues for centuries. When seawater contacts Roman concrete, it doesn't weaken it. It triggers chemical processes that actually strengthen the material over time. It's self-healing construction material that improves with age, like wine but for buildings. Except wine doesn't have to support the weight of entire cities for millennia. This isn't just impressive engineering, it's materials science that we're only now beginning to understand. Roman concrete contains crystals that form spontaneously when the material gets wet, filling microscopic cracks automatically. Gaius accidentally invented nanotechnology using volcanic ash and seawater, creating building materials that literally repair themselves at the molecular level. It's like if your smartphone could fix its own cracked screen by getting rained on, except the smartphone is a building and the repair process lasts for centuries. The Pantheon's dome, built under Gaius's supervision, is still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. It was built in 126 AD and has survived earthquakes, floods, wars, and 2,000 years of weather without any significant structural repair. Modern concrete structures are considered successful if they last 50 years without major maintenance. Roman concrete structures are considered young if they're only 1,000 years old. But here's what haunted Gaius every night: the knowledge that his work would outlast everything he cared about. His family would die, his emperor would die, his entire civilization would eventually crumble, but his concrete would remain, standing as a monument to human capability that future civilizations might not be able to match. It's like being an artist who knows their masterpiece will outlive not just them, but their entire culture, serving as a silent reproach to everyone who comes after. Roman engineers had different concrete formulations for different applications, showing a level of materials science sophistication that rivals modern engineering. Underwater concrete that hardened beneath the surface, lightweight concrete for upper floors, high-strength concrete for foundations, and decorative concrete that could be carved like stone after it cured. Gaius wasn't just mixing cement, he was creating a library of building materials, each one precisely engineered for specific applications that wouldn't be fully understood again until the 20th century. They built concrete structures underwater using techniques we're just rediscovering. Roman harbors have concrete foundations that were poured directly into the ocean floor, creating artificial harbors and breakwaters that have outlasted entire civilizations. Portsmouth Harbor still uses Roman concrete foundations that are structurally sound after 2 millennia of constant wave action. It's like building underwater cities using ancient technology, except the cities are still there and we're still trying to figure out how they did it. Here's the impossible part that keeps modern engineers awake at night. Some Roman concrete structures have earthquake resistance superior to modern buildings. The Colosseum has survived major earthquakes that damaged newer structures around it. Roman buildings in seismically active areas show evidence of sophisticated shock absorption techniques built into their concrete foundations. Gaius and his team understood seismic engineering 1,800 years before we figured out plate tectonics. Roman concrete also had thermal properties that modern materials struggled to match. Buildings stayed cool in summer and retained heat in winter through concrete formulations that regulated temperature passively. They understood thermal mass, heat transfer, and thermal expansion in ways that inform modern green building practices. Gaius was essentially an early environmental engineer, creating sustainable building materials using volcanic waste products. The most incredible discovery that would have terrified and amazed Gaius. Roman concrete continues to evolve. 2,000-year-old Roman structures show ongoing chemical changes that improve their properties. The concrete is literally getting better with age, developing new crystalline structures that increase strength and durability. It's construction material that improves itself over geological timescales, like a building that becomes more perfect the longer it exists. Modern attempts to recreate Roman concrete have been partially successful, but we still don't fully understand all the chemical processes involved. Gaius somehow developed nanotechnology-level materials, science using volcanic ash, seawater, and empirical testing, creating building materials that surpass anything we can produce today. He died knowing he'd built things that would outlast empires, but he never could have imagined that his concrete would still be getting stronger 2,000 years after his death, mocking every modern engineer who tries to match his achievements. Lucius Cornelius Balbus stands beneath the Colosseum, surrounded by the most complex mechanical system ever built in the ancient world, trying not to have a complete nervous breakdown while preparing to flood an entire amphitheater for naval battles, then transform it into a forest for hunting exhibitions, all in the same afternoon. His job description reads like a fever dream. Stage manager for 50,000 screaming Romans who expect to see impossible things happen on schedule, or they'll riot and possibly feed you to wild animals. The psychological pressure on Roman entertainment engineers was unlike anything in human history. Modern theatre technicians worry about lighting cues and sound systems. Lucius worries about hydraulic systems that could drown the emperor, mechanical lifts that could launch lions into the royal box instead of the arena floor, and stage effects that might accidentally kill half the audience if something goes wrong. It's like being a Broadway stage manager, except Broadway is filled with wild animals, the audience expects people to actually die, and technical difficulties could trigger a revolution. The underground machinery beneath the Colosseum was more complex than most modern theatres, and infinitely more dangerous. A system of pulleys, counterweights, and hydraulic lifts could raise entire landscapes through the arena floor in minutes. Forests, mountains, lakes, and complex stage sets would appear and disappear like Roman magic tricks operated by teams of engineers who understood that a single mistake could mean death for hundreds of people, including themselves. Lucius managed a technical crew that numbered in the hundreds and required training comparable to modern aerospace engineers, except without textbooks, safety manuals, or any of the mathematical frameworks we consider essential for complex engineering. Every day was essentially an experiment in applied physics conducted in front of 50,000 critics who expected perfection and had the political power to execute anyone who disappointed them. But flooding the Colosseum for naval battles, that's where Roman engineering enters the realm of the supernatural. They could fill the entire arena with water deep enough for actual warships, stage full naval combat with ramming, boarding actions, and authentic maritime warfare, then drain it completely and return to regular programming. All of this using gravity-fed systems and manual pumps operated by crews who had to coordinate like a symphony orchestra, except instead of music, they were conducting controlled flooding in the middle of downtown Rome. The logistics alone would break modern event planners. Water for naval battles had to be sourced, filtered, heated, or cooled to appropriate temperatures, then distributed and drained without flooding the surrounding city. The engineering required understanding of fluid dynamics, structural load calculations, and waterproofing techniques that wouldn't be seen again for centuries. Lucius was essentially a hydraulic engineer, naval architect, and theatrical producer all at once, working with technology that modern engineers study but can't fully replicate. Roman amphitheaters had retractable roofing systems called velaria that could cover entire stadiums using fabric structures supported by complex rigging systems operated by teams of trained sailors. The Colosseum's velarium required 240 wooden posts and a coordination system that could deploy or retract the entire roof in under an hour. It's like having a retractable stadium roof, except operated entirely by human power and rope systems that had to work perfectly in front of an audience that included the most powerful people in the world. The acoustic engineering was equally terrifying in its sophistication. Roman amphitheaters were designed so that a whisper from the arena floor could be heard clearly in the highest seats. Lucius understood sound reflection, resonance, and acoustic focusing techniques that modern architects study and attempt to recreate. Some Roman theaters had acoustic properties so precise that actors could modulate their voices for different sections of the audience, like having a built-in sound system made of stone and mathematical principles. Here's where it gets completely impossible and would have given Lucius nightmares. Romans had working escalators. Not just ramps or inclined planes, but mechanical systems with moving steps powered by water wheels and counterweight systems. Multi-story buildings in Rome included passenger conveyance systems that automatically transported people between floors. Lucius was managing technology that wouldn't be reinvented until the Industrial Revolution, except he was doing it with Bronze Age tools and the constant knowledge that mechanical failure meant public humiliation followed by creative execution. The Circus Maximus had starting gates for chariot races that were mechanically synchronized to open simultaneously across the entire width of the track. This required precision engineering and timing mechanisms that ensured fair starts for races involving dozens of chariots. Lucius was operating mechanical systems with timing precision that rivals modern athletic equipment, except his timing mechanisms were operated by human crews who had to coordinate like a precision military unit. Roman theaters featured mechanical stage machinery that could produce flying effects, appearing and disappearing actors, and scene changes that happened faster than the audience could follow. Trapdoors, flying rigs, and hydraulically powered platforms created theatrical effects that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. Lucius was essentially a special effects coordinator, working with technology that was simultaneously more primitive and more sophisticated than anything modern theatre can produce. The most incredible innovation that would have terrified and amazed Lucius. Romans had primitive mechanical computers controlling their entertainment systems, gear trains, escapement mechanisms, and programmable sequences that could automate complex theatrical presentations without human intervention. These weren't just clever mechanical devices, they were early automation systems that could execute predetermined sequences of effects with clockwork precision. Lucius was managing technology that wouldn't be understood again for over 1,000 years. and he was doing it while 50,000 Romans watched his every move and judged his competence based on whether the lions appeared on cue and the naval battles looked sufficiently authentic. Marcus Agrippa stands on a hill overlooking Rome, staring at a city of over 1 million people that functions more efficiently than most modern metropolitan areas, and the weight of maintaining this impossible urban organism is slowly destroying his sanity. His job isn't just city planning, it's keeping 1 million Romans fed, watered, housed, entertained, and reasonably non-murderous on a daily basis using technology that shouldn't be able to support a settlement of more than a few thousand people. It's like being the mayor of New York City, except with Roman technology and the absolute certainty that if anything goes wrong, you'll be thrown to wild animals in front of cheering crowds. The psychological pressure on Roman urban planners was civilization ending. Modern city managers worry about budget deficits and traffic congestion. Marcus worries about aqueduct failures that could kill hundreds of thousands of people, sewage system breakdowns that could trigger plague outbreaks, and grain supply disruptions that could cause riots leading to the collapse of the empire. His decisions don't just affect quality of life, they determine whether human civilization continues to exist. Let's start with something that sounds impossible. Ancient Rome had traffic laws that were more sophisticated than most modern cities. Not suggestions or guidelines, but actual regulations with enforcement mechanisms that made medieval Europe look like amateur hour. Delivery vehicles were restricted to nighttime hours to reduce congestion. Imagine trying to coordinate Amazon deliveries in a world without smartphones, GPS, or any form of electronic communication. One-way streets channeled traffic flow efficiently through a city larger than most modern metropolises. Parking regulations prevented commercial vehicles from blocking residential areas, enforced by officials who could fine, imprison, or exile violators. Marcus managed traffic flow for 1 million people using nothing but human observation, written regulations, and enforcement crews who had to memorize complex rules and apply them consistently across hundreds of square miles. It's like running a modern transportation department using only paper forms and word-of-mouth communication, except the consequences of failure include urban collapse and imperial dissolution. Roman waste management was so sophisticated that it included recycling programs that would impress modern environmental engineers. Different types of waste were collected separately, processed for reuse, and redistributed through organized systems that turned garbage into resources. Organic waste was composted for agricultural use, metal objects were melted down and reformed, even broken pottery was ground up and used in new, concrete formulations. Marcus wasn't just managing waste disposal, he was running a circular economy using ancient technology and human labor coordination that rivals modern industrial logistics. The water supply system for Rome supplied more clean water per capita than most modern cities, and Marcus carried the daily terror of knowing that a single major system failure could kill more people than most ancient wars. Multiple aqueducts brought water from different sources, ensuring redundancy and consistent supply even during drought, siege, or natural disasters. Distribution systems included pressure regulation, quality testing, and separate networks for drinking water, industrial use, and waste removal. Here's what would have given Marcus nightmares. Rome had 24-hour convenience stores. Markets and shops operated around the clock, serving the needs of a city that never slept. Street lighting, public safety, and commercial regulations supported a nighttime economy that functioned as efficiently as daytime activities. Marcus had to coordinate lighting systems, security patrols, and commercial oversight for a 24/7 urban economy using oil lamps, human guards, and administrative systems based on written records and personal communication. Roman cities included underground shopping complexes that would make modern mall developers weep with envy. Multi-level commercial spaces beneath street level provided shopping, dining, and entertainment options that were climate-controlled and accessible through sophisticated entrance systems. Underground Rome was as developed and organized as surface Rome, requiring engineering and coordination that modern subway systems attempt to match. Marcus was managing a three-dimensional city with underground infrastructure more complex than most modern urban areas. Public healthcare in ancient Rome included hospitals, surgical centers, and specialized medical facilities that provided better care than most medieval European cities would achieve for another 1,000 years. The city supported professional medical practitioners, regulated pharmaceutical distribution, and maintained public health standards that prevented epidemic diseases. Marcus coordinated medical services for 1 million people using administrative systems and logistical networks that rival modern healthcare management, except without computers, electronic records, or any of the technology we consider essential for medical administration. The most mind-bending innovation that would have terrified Marcus with its implications. Romans had working robots, mechanical devices powered by water pressure and gear systems that could perform repetitive tasks automatically without human supervision. Automated factories produced textiles, processed food, and manufactured goods using mechanical systems that operated like primitive industrial automation. Marcus was managing a city with robotic labor that wouldn't be seen again until the Industrial Revolution, coordinating human and mechanical workers in production systems that modern manufacturers study and attempt to recreate. Roman urban planning included public transportation systems that weren't just roads for walking, but organized systems for moving people and goods efficiently throughout large cities. Scheduling, routing, and passenger services functioned like primitive mass transit systems operated entirely through human coordination and mechanical precision. Marcus managed transportation networks for 1 million people using nothing but human planning and coordination skills that modern transit authorities struggle to match, even with computer assistance. Fire prevention and emergency response in Roman cities included professional fire brigades, water distribution systems for firefighting, and building codes that minimized fire risks through engineering principles that modern fire safety experts study and implement. Marcus coordinated emergency services for a massive urban area using communication systems based on runners, signal fires, and written reports, maintaining response times and effectiveness that many modern cities struggle to achieve. The social engineering was equally impressive and terrifying in its scope. Roman cities were designed to accommodate diverse populations with different cultural backgrounds, economic levels, and social needs. Zoning regulations, public spaces, and community services created urban environments that were functional, inclusive, and sustainable for populations that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. Marcus wasn't just planning a city, he was engineering a society, creating urban systems that supported human civilization at scales not attempted again until the Industrial Revolution made such populations possible. Roman cities were complete ecosystems designed to support human civilization at scales and efficiency levels that modern cities still struggle to match. Marcus solved urban problems that modern planners wrestle with using computer modeling, electronic systems, and global supply chains, except he did it with stone, bronze, human coordination, and mathematical principles that were lost and rediscovered over the course of centuries. He created urban systems that worked so well they continued functioning long after the empire that built them had collapsed, serving as the foundation for European civilization for over 1,000 years after their creators had become historical curiosities. If Roman engineering has left you questioning everything you thought you knew about ancient technological capabilities, prepare yourself for the Greeks, because they're about to make Roman achievements look like the warm-up act for the main event. While Romans were busy building impossible things and managing million-person cities with Bronze Age technology, the Greeks were inventing the mathematical principles that made impossible things possible in the first place, and then using those principles to build machines that shouldn't have existed for another 1,500 years. We're not talking about basic geometry and arithmetic that impressed ancient farmers. We're talking about Greeks who built mechanical computers that calculated astronomical events centuries in advance, developed mathematical concepts so advanced that they weren't rediscovered until the Renaissance, and understood physics principles that modern scientists are still trying to fully comprehend. They didn't just understand mathematics, they used it to build machines that seemed magical to everyone who saw them, including us. The Romans were impressive engineers who solved practical problems with sophisticated technology. But the Greeks were basically wizards with slide rules, creating theoretical frameworks and practical applications that made them seem like they had access to knowledge from the future. They solved mathematical problems that wouldn't be attempted again for over a millennium, then used those solutions to build devices that wouldn't be understood again until the age of mechanical clocks and precision engineering. Marcus Agrippa built cities that functioned efficiently for millions of people. Greek mathematicians built machines that could predict the future of the entire universe, then miniaturized them into devices small enough to carry in a backpack. Roman concrete gets stronger with age. Greek mathematics gets more impossible the more you understand it. So settle back in, because Mayan astronomical achievement is about to make everything we've discussed look like preliminary exercises performed by enthusiastic amateurs who happened to be really good at their chosen fields but were still essentially beginners compared to a civilization that had figured out how to predict the future using mathematics, stone, and astronomical knowledge that bordered on cosmic consciousness. Itzamnaj Barlaam, too, sits in his observatory at Copan, surrounded by stone monuments covered in calculations that will make modern astronomers question everything they thought they knew about ancient scientific capability. He's calculating the position of Venus for the year 2157 CE, over 1,400 years in the future. And his mathematics are so precise that NASA will later confirm his predictions using computer models and satellite data. It's like using stone tablets and jungle observations to predict exactly where planets will be when your civilization has been dead for over a millennium, except the predictions are more accurate than what medieval European astronomers could achieve using all their instruments and theoretical knowledge combined. The psychological weight on Itzamnaj is cosmically crushing in ways that would destroy modern scientists. He's not just tracking celestial movements, he's encoding the mathematical heartbeat of the universe into stone monuments that will outlast his entire civilization. Every calculation has to account for astronomical cycles that span thousands of years, incorporating orbital mechanics so complex that they require understanding of gravitational interactions that won't be formally discovered until Newton developed celestial mechanics 1,000 years later. It's like being personally responsible for predicting the behavior of the entire solar system using mathematical tools that shouldn't be sophisticated enough for such calculations, with the additional pressure that your predictions will be tested by civilizations that haven't been born yet. The Mayan calendar system makes modern timekeeping look like amateur hour performed by people who never learned to count past 10. They operated multiple interlocking calendar systems simultaneously. The 260-day sacred calendar, the 365-day solar year, the 584-day Venus cycle, the 780-day Mars cycle, and the 18.7-year lunar cycle, all coordinated through mathematical calculations that tracked their relationships across centuries with precision that modern computers are used to verify. Itzamnaj wasn't just making calendars, he was building temporal machines that could navigate through time with mathematical precision that rivals GPS satellites navigating through space. But here's what would have driven Itzamnaj to astronomical madness. He was calculating celestial events that wouldn't occur for thousands of years with accuracy that demonstrates understanding of orbital mechanics that his civilization theoretically shouldn't possess. The Venus tables at Copan predict Venus cycles 500 years into the future with precision that varies from actual astronomical events by less than 2 hours. He was doing orbital mechanics calculations that require understanding of elliptical orbits, gravitational perturbations, and celestial mechanics principles that weren't formally developed until Kepler and Newton revolutionized astronomy in the 17th century. The mathematical sophistication required for these calculations was staggering and impossible. Mayan astronomers understood that Venus has an orbital period of 583.92 days, which they calculated as 584 days, giving them an error rate of 0.08 days per cycle. Over the 300-year period covered by their Venus tables, this accumulated to an error of only about 2 days total. They were achieving astronomical precision that modern astronomy confirms using telescopes, computer models, and mathematical frameworks that didn't exist in ancient Mesoamerica. Itzamnaj worked with eclipse prediction tables that calculated solar and lunar eclipses thousands of years in advance, accounting for the complex interactions between solar, lunar, and terrestrial cycles that require sophisticated understanding of orbital mechanics and gravitational astronomy. The Dresden Codex eclipse tables predict eclipses with accuracy that demonstrates knowledge of the Saros cycle, eclipse magnitude, and geographic visibility that rivals modern astronomical prediction capabilities. He was essentially running an ancient NASA mission control center, tracking multiple planetary bodies simultaneously and predicting their future positions with precision that makes modern astronomers reconsider their assumptions about what ancient civilizations could achieve. Here's the impossible part that would have shattered Itzamnaj's understanding of cosmic order. Mayan calculations incorporated corrections for irregularities in planetary orbits that suggest awareness of gravitational influences from other planets affecting orbital mechanics. Their Venus tables include adjustments for orbital variations that occur due to gravitational interactions with Earth, Mars, and Jupiter, celestial mechanical effects that weren't understood until modern astronomy developed gravitational theory and computer modeling to track multi-body orbital interactions. The psychological impact on Mayan astronomers was profound and spiritually devastating. They possessed godlike knowledge of cosmic events, able to predict eclipses, planetary positions, and celestial cycles with precision that set them apart from normal humanity. But they also carried the burden of responsibility for maintaining cosmic order through ritual and ceremony timed to astronomical events they had calculated centuries in advance. They weren't just observing the universe, they believed they were helping to maintain its stability through precisely timed ritual actions coordinated with cosmic rhythms they had decoded through mathematical analysis. But the most terrifying aspect for Itzamnaj, he was encoding knowledge into stone monuments that would preserve astronomical calculations long after his civilization disappeared, creating mathematical time capsules that would be deciphered by future archaeologists who would discover that ancient Mayans had achieved astronomical precision that exceeded European capabilities for over 1,000 years. His calculations would survive the collapse of classic Maya civilization, the Spanish conquest, and centuries of scholarly dismissal before finally being recognized as some of the most sophisticated astronomical achievements in human history. The calendar correlation problem that modern scholars call the GMT constant requires understanding of Mayan mathematical systems so sophisticated that archaeologists are still debating how ancient astronomers achieved such precision using observational techniques and mathematical tools that shouldn't have been capable of producing results accurate enough to predict astronomical events across millennia. Itzamnaj was working with mathematical frameworks that modern scholars study but struggle to fully comprehend, creating astronomical achievements that were lost, forgotten, rediscovered, and finally recognized as evidence that ancient civilizations possessed scientific capabilities that challenged assumptions about the linear progression of human knowledge. Gesao Chankawil. I sits in his palace at Tikal, working with mathematical concepts so advanced that they won't be discovered independently by other civilizations for centuries, and the philosophical implications are driving him toward the kind of existential crisis that comes from realizing you've just invented infinity while everyone else is still struggling with basic arithmetic. He's manipulating the concept of zero not just as a placeholder but as an actual number that represents nothingness as a mathematical entity, using it to perform calculations involving infinite series and numerical relationships that approach the boundaries of mathematical abstraction. It's like inventing calculus while your neighbors are still using counting stones, except the mathematical concepts you're developing challenge the fundamental nature of existence, quantity, and the relationship between something and nothing. The psychological weight on Gesao Chankawil is philosophically crushing in ways that would break modern mathematicians. He's not just working with advanced numerical systems. He's confronting mathematical concepts that force him to think about the nature of nothingness, the possibility of infinite quantities, and numerical relationships that exist beyond physical reality. The concept of zero as an actual number, rather than just empty space, creates logical paradoxes and mathematical possibilities that challenge basic assumptions about quantity, existence, and the relationship between mathematics and reality. It's like being forced to contemplate the mathematical nature of cosmic void while trying to maintain sanity in a universe where nothingness has become a calculable quantity. The Mayan mathematical system was based on vigesimal, base 20, counting rather than the decimal, base 10 system that most cultures developed, giving them computational advantages that modern mathematicians recognize as more efficient for certain types of calculation. Base 20 mathematics allows for more elegant handling of fractions, more efficient multiplication and division, and better representation of complex numerical relationships. Jasar Chan-Kawil was working with a mathematical framework that was objectively superior to the numerical systems used by contemporary civilizations, giving Mayan mathematicians computational capabilities that exceeded what other cultures could achieve using their mathematical tools. But here's what would have driven Jasar Chan-Kawil to mathematical madness. The Mayan conception of zero included understanding of mathematical infinity as a practical concept rather than just a philosophical abstraction. They worked with numerical series that approached infinite values, calculated with quantities that had no upper limits, and manipulated mathematical relationships that involved infinitely large and infinitely small numbers. This wasn't just theoretical mathematics. They were using infinite concepts for practical calculations involving astronomical cycles, architectural proportions, and calendar systems that operated across cosmic timescales. The long count calendar demonstrates Mayan understanding of mathematical infinity applied to temporal measurement. The calendar can theoretically count forward and backward for billions of years using mathematical notation that can represent virtually infinite time periods with precision that accounts for cosmic cycles extending far beyond human civilization. Jasar Chan-Kawil was working with temporal mathematics that treated time as an infinite quantity that could be measured, calculated, and manipulated through numerical systems sophisticated enough to handle infinitely large time periods with mathematical precision. Mayan mathematical texts include calculations involving numbers so large they have no practical purpose except to demonstrate understanding of mathematical infinity as a manipulable concept. They calculated with numbers reaching into millions and billions, performed operations with quantities that exceeded any conceivable practical application, and worked with mathematical relationships that existed purely as abstract numerical exercises. This wasn't mathematics for practical use. This was pure mathematical exploration that pushed the boundaries of numerical possibility for the intellectual pleasure of working with infinite concepts. Here's the impossible part that would have shattered Jasar Chan-Kawil's understanding of mathematical reality. Mayan mathematicians understood concepts that approach modern mathematical analysis, including infinite series, limit calculations, and numerical relationships that wouldn't be formally developed until medieval Islamic scholars and Renaissance European mathematicians rediscovered advanced mathematical techniques. They were working with mathematical concepts that challenged the boundaries between finite human understanding and infinite cosmic reality. The psychological implications were staggering for Mayan intellectual culture. Mathematicians possessed numerical tools that could represent infinity, calculate with nothingness, and manipulate mathematical abstractions that had no physical equivalent in observable reality. They were working with mathematical concepts that revealed the abstract foundations underlying physical existence, suggesting that reality itself was constructed according to mathematical principles that included infinite and zero quantities as fundamental components of cosmic structure. But Mayan mathematicians also confronted mathematical paradoxes and logical contradictions that arose from working with zero and infinity. They discovered that mathematical operations involving infinity could produce contradictory results, that zero could behave in ways that violated normal numerical logic, and that infinite quantities created mathematical relationships that challenged common sense understanding of quantity and existence. They were pioneers in mathematical territory that revealed the logical limits of numerical reasoning and the philosophical implications of mathematical abstraction. The most terrifying discovery for Jasar Chan-Kawil, mathematical infinity implied cosmic possibilities that challenged religious beliefs, political stability, and humanity's place in a universe that might itself be mathematically infinite. If mathematical concepts could represent infinite quantities, then the universe might contain infinite space, infinite time, and infinite possibilities that exceeded human comprehension or control. They weren't just discovering mathematical techniques, they were uncovering evidence that reality might be infinitely larger and more complex than human minds could grasp. Modern mathematical analysis confirms that Mayan numerical systems and mathematical concepts were sophisticated enough to handle advanced calculations that European mathematics wouldn't achieve until the Renaissance developed algebraic notation and analytical techniques for working with infinite series and complex numerical relationships. Jasor Chan-Carwil was working with mathematical frameworks that were centuries ahead of contemporary civilizations, developing numerical tools and mathematical concepts that were lost, forgotten, and rediscovered multiple times before being recognized as evidence of advanced mathematical achievement that exceeded the capabilities of most ancient cultures. The philosophical impact on individual Mayan mathematicians was profound and often spiritually devastating. They possessed mathematical tools that revealed the abstract foundations of reality, understanding numerical concepts that challenged basic assumptions about existence, quantity, and the relationship between mathematics and cosmic order. But they also confronted mathematical infinities and logical paradoxes that demonstrated the limits of human reason and the possibility that the universe contained mathematical relationships too complex for mortal minds to fully comprehend, creating intellectual isolation and philosophical crisis that defined the Mayan mathematical tradition. Kinich Janab Pakal Tharwai stands atop the Temple of Inscriptions in Palenque, surveying a city of 100,000 people thriving in dense tropical rainforest that should be completely incapable of supporting such a large population, and the engineering challenges are driving him toward the kind of urban planning madness that comes from realizing you've built Manhattan in the Amazon using Stone Age technology and hydraulic engineering that won't be understood for centuries. He's managing water systems, agricultural networks, and urban infrastructure that supports a population density higher than most modern cities, all while working within an ecosystem that modern urban planners consider impossible for large-scale human habitation. It's like building Las Vegas in a swamp using only stone tools and mathematical genius, except the swamp is actively trying to reclaim everything you build and your infrastructure has to function perfectly, or everyone dies. The psychological pressure on Pakal is civilizationally crushing in ways that would destroy modern city planners. He's not just managing urban infrastructure, he's maintaining artificial ecosystems that keep massive populations alive in environments that naturally resist human habitation. Every engineering decision has to account for rainfall that can wash away roads overnight, humidity that rots wooden structures in months, and soil conditions that make construction nearly impossible. It's like being responsible for keeping a major metropolitan area functioning in conditions where basic infrastructure fails constantly, with the additional pressure that your engineering solutions have to work using technology that shouldn't be sophisticated enough for the environmental challenges you're facing. Palenque was built in terrain that modern engineers would consider unsuitable for large-scale urban development. Steep hillsides, seasonal flooding, dense jungle growth, and soil conditions that make stable construction extremely difficult. But Mayan engineers created terraced cities, sophisticated drainage systems, and architectural complexes that not only survived in these conditions but thrived for centuries while supporting populations that exceeded the carrying capacity of the natural environment. Pakal was essentially performing urban planning miracles, building cities that shouldn't exist using engineering techniques that converted environmental obstacles into urban advantages. The hydraulic engineering required to support jungle cities was so sophisticated that it included water management systems more advanced than most modern municipal infrastructure. Mayan cities featured pressurized water systems, underground aqueducts, and reservoir networks that collected, stored, and distributed water throughout urban areas using gravity-fed systems and pressure differentials. They built water treatment facilities that purified rainwater, filtered groundwater, and maintained water quality standards that prevented waterborne diseases in populations that exceeded 100,000 people living in tropical environments where water contamination was a constant threat. But here's what would have driven Pakal to engineering insanity. The agricultural systems that supported these jungle cities required understanding of soil chemistry, hydroponic farming, and ecological engineering that converted swampland into productive agricultural zones capable of feeding massive urban populations. Mayan raised field systems, known as chinampas, were artificial agricultural islands built in wetland areas using layers of mud, vegetation, and organic matter that created incredibly fertile growing environments. They were essentially building floating farms using ecological engineering principles that increased agricultural productivity per acre beyond what modern farming achieves in similar environmental conditions. The underground water systems at Palenque included pressurized aqueducts that transported water uphill through stone channels using hydraulic engineering that required understanding of fluid dynamics, pressure calculations, and hydraulic power transmission. The palace complex featured toilets, baths, and fountains connected to water systems that operated automatically using pressure differentials and gravity-fed mechanisms. Pakal was managing municipal water infrastructure that provided running water, waste disposal, and water pressure systems that most European cities wouldn't achieve until the Industrial Revolution made such urban infrastructure technically and economically feasible. Here's the impossible part that would have shattered Pakal's understanding of urban possibilities. Mayan cities achieved population densities and urban infrastructure sophistication that exceeded contemporary civilizations while operating in environmental conditions that modern urban planners consider prohibitive for large-scale development. They built cities that functioned more efficiently than most modern urban areas while using construction techniques, water management systems, and agricultural technologies that were lost and rediscovered multiple times over the following centuries. The waste management systems in Mayan cities included sewage treatment, garbage disposal, and sanitation infrastructure that prevented disease outbreaks in dense urban populations living in tropical environments where poor sanitation typically causes massive public health crises. They built urban drainage systems that handled seasonal flooding, controlled water flow during heavy rains, and maintained sanitary conditions that kept large populations healthy in climatic conditions where disease transmission is normally rapid and devastating. The agricultural engineering that supported jungle cities was so advanced that it included soil creation, ecosystem modification, and landscape transformation that converted natural rainforest into agricultural zones without causing environmental collapse. Mayan agricultural systems actually increased biodiversity, improved soil quality, and enhanced ecosystem stability while supporting population densities that modern sustainable agriculture struggles to achieve. Pakal was managing ecological engineering projects that improved environmental conditions while supporting large human populations, achieving sustainability goals that modern environmental engineering attempts to replicate using computer modeling and technological assistance that wasn't available to ancient civilizations. But the most terrifying aspect for Pakal, he was building urban infrastructure that would continue functioning long after his civilization collapsed, creating cities so well engineered that they remained habitable for centuries after the political and social systems that built them had disappeared. The engineering was so sophisticated that Spanish conquistadors found Mayan cities still functioning with water systems, agricultural zones, and urban infrastructure that exceeded European capabilities, but they couldn't understand or maintain the engineering systems that kept these jungle cities operational. Modern attempts to build sustainable cities in tropical rainforest environments study Mayan urban planning techniques and attempt to recreate hydraulic systems, agricultural methods, and construction techniques that ancient engineers developed using empirical testing and mathematical analysis. Pakal achieved urban engineering that modern sustainable development projects use as models for ecological urban planning, creating cities that were simultaneously environmentally sustainable and technologically sophisticated beyond what most ancient civilizations could achieve in any environmental conditions. The psychological impact on Mayan urban planners was profound and often overwhelming. They possessed engineering knowledge that allowed them to build cities in impossible locations, creating urban environments that seemed magical to inhabitants and visitors who couldn't understand how such large populations could thrive in environmental conditions that typically prevented large-scale human habitation. But they also carried the burden of maintaining engineering systems so complex that their failure would mean death for hundreds of thousands of people, creating psychological pressure that modern urban planners can't fully comprehend, because modern cities have backup systems, external support networks, and technological assistance that didn't exist in ancient jungle cities. Itzamnaj Carwil sits atop the Caracol Observatory at Chichen Itza, using stone windows and shadow calculations to track celestial movements with precision that will make modern astronomers reconsider their assumptions about what ancient civilizations could achieve without telescopes, and the mathematical complexity is driving him toward the kind of observational madness that comes from realizing you can predict cosmic events centuries in advance using nothing but careful observation and mathematical genius that borders on supernatural insight. He's tracking Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn through complex orbital calculations performed entirely through naked-eye observation and stone instruments that shouldn't be sophisticated enough for planetary astronomy. Yet his predictions are more accurate than what European astronomers will achieve for another 1,000 years. It's like running mission control for multiple space probes using only stone observatories and mathematical calculations, except your mission control can predict exactly where every planet will be for the next several centuries. The psychological weight on Itzamnaj is cosmically devastating in ways that would break modern astronomers. He's not just observing celestial movements. He's encoding the mathematical laws that govern planetary motion into stone monuments that will preserve astronomical knowledge long after his civilization disappears. Every observation has to be recorded with precision that accounts for orbital variations, atmospheric distortion, and measurement uncertainties that accumulate over centuries of data collection. It's like being personally responsible for mapping the entire solar system using tools that shouldn't be capable of such precision, with the additional pressure that your astronomical calculations will be tested by future civilizations who will judge the scientific capability of your entire culture based on the accuracy of your predictions. The Caracol Observatory was aligned to track specific astronomical events with architectural precision that required understanding of celestial mechanics, observational astronomy, and construction engineering that combined multiple scientific disciplines into astronomical architecture. The building's windows and staircases were positioned to frame particular stars, planets, and celestial events at specific times, creating a stone computer that could automatically track astronomical phenomena through architectural alignment rather than mechanical instruments. Itzamnaj was building observatory technology that used the entire structure as a precision astronomical instrument capable of making observations that modern astronomy confirms using telescopes and computer analysis. But here's what would have driven Itzamnaj to astronomical insanity. He was tracking planetary movements and predicting astronomical events with accuracy that demonstrates understanding of orbital mechanics principles that weren't formally developed until Kepler discovered elliptical orbits and Newton developed gravitational theory. Mayan astronomical texts predict planetary positions, eclipse timing, and celestial alignments with precision that requires knowledge of gravitational influences, orbital perturbations, and celestial mechanical effects that ancient astronomers, theoretically, shouldn't have been able to observe or calculate. The Venus observations recorded at Chichen Itza track the planet's synodic period with accuracy that varies from modern astronomical measurements by less than 7 minutes over a 584-day cycle. They calculated Venus's orbital period as 583.92 days, which modern astronomy confirms as accurate to 4 decimal places. Itzamnaj was achieving observational precision that requires understanding of atmospheric refraction, measurement error compensation, and observational techniques that minimize the uncertainties inherent in naked-eye astronomy. Mayan astronomical records include predictions of rare astronomical events that occur only once every several decades or centuries, demonstrating observational programs that span multiple generations of astronomers working with consistent mathematical frameworks and observational techniques. They predicted the return of comets, calculated the timing of planetary conjunctions and tracked celestial cycles that required centuries of continuous observation to establish reliable patterns. Itzamnaj was participating in astronomical research programs that exceeded the scope and duration of most modern astronomical projects. Here's the impossible part that would have shattered Itzamnaj's understanding of cosmic order. Mayan astronomical observations were so precise that they detected orbital variations and celestial mechanical effects that require modern astronomy's most sophisticated instruments and mathematical models to measure and predict. They tracked variations in planetary orbits that are caused by gravitational interactions between multiple planets, observed changes in eclipse patterns that result from complex lunar orbital mechanics, and recorded astronomical phenomena that demonstrate observational capabilities that approach the limits of naked-eye astronomy. The mathematical frameworks used to analyze and predict astronomical events were so sophisticated that they included error correction, statistical analysis, and computational techniques that allowed ancient astronomers to extract reliable astronomical information from observational data that contained inevitable measurement uncertainties. Mayan astronomical calculations incorporated corrections for atmospheric effects, compensated for instrumental limitations, and used statistical methods to improve accuracy that modern astronomy recognizes as advanced data analysis techniques. The psychological implications were staggering for Mayan astronomical culture. Astronomers possessed observational capabilities and predictive knowledge that set them apart from normal humanity, able to predict eclipses, planetary movements, and celestial events with godlike precision that seemed magical to people who couldn't understand the mathematical principles underlying astronomical prediction. But they also carried the spiritual responsibility for maintaining cosmic order through ritual actions timed to astronomical events they had predicted centuries in advance, creating psychological pressure that combined scientific precision with religious obligation. But the most terrifying aspect for Itzamnaj, he was encoding astronomical knowledge into stone observatories and mathematical texts that would preserve scientific achievements long after his civilization collapsed, creating scientific time capsules that would be discovered by future archaeologists who would realize that ancient Mayans had achieved astronomical precision that exceeded European capabilities until telescopes and mathematical astronomy made such accuracy technically achievable. His observations would survive the classic Maya collapse, the Spanish conquest, and centuries of scholarly dismissal before finally being recognized as some of the most sophisticated astronomical achievements in pre-telescopic history. Modern reconstructions of Mayan astronomical techniques require computer modeling, statistical analysis, and observational programs that use technological assistance to achieve the precision that ancient astronomers accomplished using naked-eye observation and mathematical calculation. Itzamnaj was working with observational methods and mathematical frameworks that modern astronomy studies, but struggles to replicate with the same elegance and accuracy using only the technological resources available to ancient civilizations. The astronomical legacy that Itzamnaj and his colleagues created influenced Mesoamerican scientific traditions for over 1,000 years and provided mathematical frameworks and observational techniques that were studied, preserved, and developed by subsequent civilizations until European contact disrupted indigenous scientific traditions and replaced them with European astronomical methods that were initially less sophisticated than the astronomical achievements ancient Mayans had developed using stone observatories and mathematical genius that approached cosmic consciousness. Standing here at the end of our journey through 4 impossible civilizations, you might be experiencing the kind of existential vertigo that comes from realizing that human knowledge doesn't progress in a straight line, that ancient civilizations achieved technological and intellectual capabilities that we're still trying to understand and match, and that the story of human achievement is far stranger, far more complex, and far more humbling than anything you learned in school. We've witnessed William de Montfort's terror as he charged into medieval battles that were nothing like Hollywood promised, watched Marcus Vitruvius engineer Roman infrastructure that still makes modern cities look primitive, followed Hipparchus as he built mechanical computers that shouldn't have existed for another 1,500 years, and stood with Itzamnaj as he predicted the future of the cosmos using mathematical precision that rivals modern space agencies. These weren't primitive ancestors struggling with basic technology. These were civilizations that solved problems we still struggle with, built things we can't replicate, and achieved intellectual breakthroughs that were lost and rediscovered multiple times over the course of human history. They remind us that progress isn't inevitable, that knowledge can disappear, and that sometimes the ancient world was more advanced than we care to admit. The medieval knights who seemed so backward were part of a military-industrial complex that was more sophisticated than most modern people realize. The Romans weren't just good at conquering, they were master engineers who built infrastructure that outlasted their empire by over 1,000 years. The Greeks didn't just philosophize, they built technology that seemed magical even to us. And the Mayans weren't just calendar makers, they were cosmic engineers who treated the universe like a predictable machine they could calculate and control. Each civilization faced the same fundamental challenge: how to push the boundaries of human capability using the tools and knowledge available to them. What they achieved should have been impossible. That they achieved it anyway reminds us that human ingenuity, mathematical insight, and engineering persistence can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable, create solutions that seem magical, and build achievements that outlast the civilizations that created them. The next time you use GPS navigation, remember Eratosthenes calculating the Earth's circumference using shadows. When you marvel at modern architecture, think about Ictinus building optical illusions from stone. When you use a computer, consider Hipparchus creating mechanical calculators from bronze gears. When you check a calendar app, remember Issam Nagy predicting astronomical events centuries into the future using observations and mathematics. History isn't a story of steady progress from primitive to sophisticated. It's a story of human brilliance appearing in unexpected places, achieving impossible things, and reminding us that our ancestors were far more capable than we often assume. They solved problems we're still working on, built things we still can't match, and achieved understanding that we're still trying to rediscover. The darkness isn't falling. The light was always there, flickering through different civilizations, sometimes bright, sometimes dim, but never completely extinguished. Tonight, you've seen that light at its brightest, burning through ancient minds that refused to accept limitations and built monuments to human capability that still inspire, confuse, and humble us today. Sweet dreams. And remember, you're sleeping in a world built on foundations laid by people who thought the impossible was just another engineering problem waiting to be solved.